Hello and welcome to the At the Races web preview of the first race of the 2013 Cheltenham Festival, the William Hill Supreme Novices Hurdle. To guide us through the key contenders, I'm delighted to say we're joined by the pro punter and racing analyst Andy Gibson. We'll hear from Andy very shortly, but first off, let's have a look at the best prices for the first race of the festival, the William Hill Supreme Novices Hurdle. My 10 to yours is the 7-4 market leader. Jeski is 9-2. William Mullins has a whole host of entries headed by Una 2 at 5-1. Dodging Bullets for Paul Nicholls at 10-1 alongside Melodic Rendezvous. It's 12-1 and bigger the remainder. Well, JP McManus has the top two in the betting. He's got My 10 to yours and Jeski, and we can now hear from the trader of My 10 to yours, Nicky Henderson.
What looked like a nice horse suddenly became a heck, what's that on the Saturday, and yeah, it's great, and he'll head for the Supreme.
A lot of bookmakers overreacted and had him in the champion hurdle. Was that an overreaction by
Well, I think it was probably, there was the Darlan factor in it as well, possibly thinking that without Darlan would they do that. In fairness, quite a lot of people have already sort of not written off, but forgotten about Binocular, who's also JP's, and he's in good form. So I don't think there's, and I think and hope there's no need to bring. I mean, it's brave to say that My 10 to yours will win the Supreme, and Binoculars, therefore, he'll go and win the champion hurdle. So there was no need to switch him anyway. That would be a brave way of looking at life. That wasn't the way. But I mean, the obvious thing to do with My 10 to yours is take the novice route.
So My 10 to yours is the favourite at 7-4. We can say now a very warm welcome to Andy. And My 10 to yours, Andy, very, very impressive in all that he's done this season.
Yeah, and particularly, you know, the one that you'd rate him on his last race at the Betfair Hurdle. And I think the interesting thing with the Betfair Hurdle is that he won that race off a mark of 149. And I remember a couple of years ago, Get Me Out of Here won the same race for the same connections. And he won off 135, and I can remember thinking, well, you know, he's in the mix for the Supreme Hurdle on the back of that win over 135. And as it turned out, I think he got beaten a nose or a head or something by Menora, didn't he? So the race worked out really well that year, Menora, him, and the fourth horse, Oscar Whiskey. And this year, of course, My 10 to yours won it more impressively from a £14 higher mark, and now he's coming to this with an incredibly high 162. So he's well clear of most of these on the ratings, certainly.
And even his early season form, we can see him here at Ascot beating Tarquin de Soul of John O'Neill's. I know the second horse was given weight, but he's gone on and won a Grade 1, so even his early season form is very impressive.
It is, and it's the style of everything he's done, isn't it? That obviously makes him look. He's got a very, very sexy profile. His performance last time out was just absolutely brilliant. I mean, if you want to pick holes, I mean, you could say that the first three home were the first three most of the way around. Nothing came from behind in that race. You know, there's always negatives with the performance, and but he travelled so incredibly well, perhaps too keenly, and won by 5 lengths. And the doubts with him would be whether or not he boils over on the day, I would suggest.
And people were talking about him as a potential champion hurdle candidate after that race. Would you put him into that sort of bracket on the back of his Betfair win?
Well, I think it's interesting the choice they've made, because obviously, clearly they've got the second favourite as well, or JP has got the second favourite as well, who looked, you know, at least a reasonably strong favourite before My 10 to yours came. There must be a reason for that. I mean, I think possibly one of the reasons that he's not going for the champion is that Nicky Henderson seems to be particularly talking up the chances of Binocular this year, doesn't he?
He does seem very
even more
keen on him,
so than usual. I mean, I know Binocular's generally a hyped horse, but even more so than usual. So perhaps Binocular is in such good form they don't want to go. I'm not sure, but I would have gone champion hurdle myself and given them two shots, but no, My 10 to yours. He's going for the Supreme, 7-4 favourite. He's very short. Fighting
talk from Andy then about My 10 to yours. Let's have a look at the other horse we mentioned of JP McManus's. This is Jeski, of course, carrying different colours early in the season, but he's what, 4 from 4, Andy, and he's been winning at the highest level.
Yeah, and the race before this one, he won at Fairy House, and he jumped the least well of the main contenders that day, I felt. And I thought it was, he definitely looked like a horse that would improve for going left-handed. He jumped much better this day. He beat Wahib, I think it was, into second, wasn't it? The form hasn't worked out particularly well, but he did look particularly good on the day. And I would say that, comparing him with My 10 to yours, I think that he's probably a more reliable contender on the day. And if I was going to get involved with My 10 to yours, I think I'd want to be waiting until he's gone to the start and have a look at him and see how he is on the day. Whereas I think Jeski's possibly more chance of finishing in the first three and running his race.
And would it concern you with Jeski that he's been to the festival last year and only finished midfield of the bumper?
Well, you'd rather see him finish in the first three than you know. Other than that, not particularly. But it's interesting that Barry Geraghty's always maintained that this horse will be much better on good ground. I'm certain he's better on a left-handed track, and I would think there's a very good chance that Jeski will run his race and be in the first two or three.
And looking back to last year, Jesse Harrington said after the race had come a little bit too soon for him, and with hindsight, she wouldn't have run him. But speaking of Jesse Harrington, one of her Irish contemporaries is Willie Mullins. He's got a whole host of challenges for this year's Supreme Novices Hurdle. And let's hear then from the Irish champion trainer.
You've got tremendous strength and depth in the Supreme Novice Hurdle, Willie. 4 really high-profile horses in there at the moment. Una 2, Muzzletop, Peak Sue, Champagne Fever. Could all 4 conceivably run, all different owners?
Yes, they could. Champagne Fever is an interesting one. He could actually go out for the Albert Bartlett. He has enough staying in his pedigree, but the same owner has Ballycasey, Pont Alexander, and then Champagne, and we sort of been saying all along he's going for the Supreme Novice, but you know, he disappointed us the day he got sick in Naas, and I'm thinking, could I or should I let him take on Ballycasey in the Albert Bartlett? I'm not going to let him take on Pont Alexander, I think, and the Supreme Novice looks a real hot race. But then you saw what he did in the bumper last year. Against what people thought was hot opposition there too, and if he comes back to his best, maybe, you know, he's a good jumper, but the Supreme Novice is going to be probably one of the most difficult races at the festival to win, I think.
102 is interesting, Willie. He's not dissimilar to Ballycasey in that he probably hasn't achieved a great deal in terms of the bare form, but he looks a really exciting horse. Do you think he can make this step up and take it in his stride?
I think so. He's yeah, he shows a fair bit at home. Yeah.
And you missed the Grade 1 at Leopardstown with him.
Yeah, it just wasn't right. I'd intended to run him, and I just worked himself in Champagne Fever, and Champagne Fever did a nice bit of work. And Emmett, who normally rides on a 2, wasn't happy with him. I wasn't happy looking at him, he wasn't happy riding him. And we decided we'd give it a miss rather than go there and give him a hard race maybe when he wasn't fully right. So hopefully we'll get him to Cheltenham in good order.
And Peak Sue won well at Dundalk. He's a horse that seems to want better ground.
He does. He ran a cracker in the bumper at Cheltenham last year, so he likes the place as well. So we'll let him take his chance there.
And obviously you know perfectly well what it takes to win that race. I mean, having done so on several occasions. Do you think this year? Well, 2 at least I can think of anyway. Yeah. Do you think this year's bunch are well up to the standard required?
I've got. Mine are nice. Yeah, you need a lot of luck in running. That's like everyone is hyped. The jockeys are hyped. The horses are hyped. It's the first race of the festival. They go a million. People can't wait to get the festival going, and it's a tough race. You know, guys make mistakes in it because they're just wound up. You know, everyone's waiting for the festival all year, and there they are down at the start, and they just can't wait for the starter to pull the lever. And you know, if you miss the first or second hurl, you're gone, you're out with a wash, and you can't get back into the race. And it's important to try and get the first 2 jumps right and get around the bend and settle into the race. But they go a million. It's a very tough race, and you know, with the likes of Jetski and My Tenter Euros in it this year, it's going to take a lot of winning. I think it's going to be one of the toughest renewals of it for years.
So Willie Mullins with a very strong hand in the Supreme Novices, but Una 2 seems to be the principal contender from his yard.
Yeah, certainly, and I think he's been particularly impressive in both races, albeit not in top class races. The one we're watching this is his second race, I think, isn't it?
It is, yeah, nice, yeah.
And on this occasion, I timed this race, and on the second circuit he ran a couple of seconds quicker than Solwit. 154 rated Solwit for the final circuit. In his first race, he was marginally quicker than the 2 years older Moscow Manon. So although the form hasn't amounted to much in itself, the times have been very good, and it's looked like a particularly impressive performance both times, albeit not in the top class.
And he's got to face a sterner examination on better ground come the Supreme. And I think the worry for me with him is that he looks as though he's got to be a big chasing type, and whether this might just all happen a little bit fast for him.
Yeah, and it's the perennial dilemma with the festival, isn't it? You get the Irish horses coming over that have continually run on heavy ground, sometimes in softer races, in small fields. Slight difference this year in that a lot of the English horses have also only run on heavy ground, but nevertheless it's a don't know, it's an unknown, and you have to factor that into the price with Una 2.
Well, that's the Irish challenge. Let's consider the English challenge, and we've got Melodic Rendezvous and Puffin Billy. We can see Puffin Billy in action. He's looking as though he's more likely to go towards the Neptune, Andy, but Melodic Rendezvous definitely runs in this race for Jeremy Scott, and he beat Puffin Billy, although Puffin Billy's since been found to have been carrying an injury at Exeter last time out. Yeah,
and Melodic Rendezvous, again, is another horse that's travelled really well. I mean, Melodic Rendezvous is a case in point of a horse that's run on very soft ground.
All the way through the season.
Yeah, and Jeremy Scott's generally are better on better ground. Jeremy Scott has always been adamant that this horse will be better on better ground. He's a Grade 1 winner. He beat Puffin Billy last time. I know that, you know, they said that it wasn't 100%, but I mean, Puffin Billy travelled perfectly well in that race up until the last or the second last. You know, I think, you know, you take on board what the trainers are saying, but you're probably better keeping an open mind about the quality of that form, rather than being categorically saying, well, it's no good because Puffin Billy wasn't very good, or it's Puffin Billy will count him as 100%. I think you should stay open-minded with it and count Melodic Rendezvous on his previous run at Sandown, which was good enough to see him in the first 3 or 4 here.
Well, my 10 to yours is the 7-4 favourite. Jeski's at 9-2. Una 2 at 5-1. We've seen those 3 in action. Dodging Bullet at 10-1. Melodic Rendezvous the same price, 12-1, and bigger the remainder. Andy, give us the winner of the Supreme Novices.
Well, in terms of a betting strategy for the race, I would wait until my 10 to yours has got to the start. If he hasn't boiled over, then I think he's easily the likeliest winner of the race, but I think Jeski is a very strong horse to put in your each-way multiples to start the meeting off with.